The warning lights flashed red across the pristine white walls of the Galactic Council's most advanced medical research station. Deep in the station's secure labs, head researcher Reed stared at the horrifying readings on his screen, his blue-tinted hands shaking. The pathogen they had been studying had mutated faster than anyone could have predicted. Security breach in Lab Section 7. The station's AI announced in its calm voice, "Emergency containment protocols now in effect." Reed's 4 eyes widened as he watched the security doors slam shut throughout the facility. The massive metal barriers were designed to protect the rest of the galaxy from the dangerous materials they studied here. Now those same barriers trapped 300 of the galaxy's brightest minds inside with a deadly threat. "Report," he called out to his team, trying to keep his voice steady. Around him, other researchers scrambled to their stations, their lighter builds and delicate frames moving swiftly under the station's carefully maintained low gravity. "Sir, the pathogen has already spread through the ventilation system in sectors 3 through 8, one of his assistants reported, her antenna twitching with stress. "It's mutating at an unprecedented rate. Our immune systems won't be able to handle it." Reed moved to the emergency containment suits stored along the wall. He grabbed one and immediately stumbled, his legs buckling under its weight. Even with the station's gravity set to match their homeworld standards of 0.3 Earth gravity, the suit was impossibly heavy. "Computer, reduce gravity in emergency response sectors," he ordered. Unable to comply, the AI responded. "Minimum gravity levels must be maintained for critical system operations." More alarms began to sound as the first infection cases were reported. Reed watched in horror as the medical bay filled with researchers already showing symptoms. Their bodies, evolved for lives on gentle, low-gravity worlds, were completely unprepared for this crisis. "Sir," his second-in-command called out, "none of our staff can operate effectively in the containment suits." The physical strain. She didn't need to finish. They all knew their limitations. Reed made his way to the communications center, his heart's pounding with exertion. The council had to be notified. As he activated the emergency channel, he realized with growing dread what this meant. There was only one solution, but it was one that would make many council members very uncomfortable. "This is Head Researcher Reed of Station MS-42, he announced to the council feed. "We have a Class 1 biological emergency. We need immediate assistance." He paused, knowing his next words would cause an uproar. "We need a Deathworlder." The response was immediate. The council chamber erupted in protests and arguments. On his screen, Reed could see various council members, their delicate features twisted in concern, and in some cases, disgust. "Absolutely not," one council member declared, "allowing a Deathworlder into our most secure facility." "We have no choice," Reed interrupted, something he had never dared to do before. "The pathogen will breach full containment in less than 30 hours. None of our people can handle the physical demands of containment procedures. We need someone from a high-gravity world." "You mean Earth," another council member said quietly. The chamber fell silent at the mention of that notorious planet. "Yes," Reed confirmed. "We need a human." The silence stretched on as the implications sank in. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as barely civilized brutes from a savage, high-gravity death trap of a planet. They were also the closest species capable of operating in the physical conditions this crisis demanded. As Reed waited for their decision, another alarm blared. The pathogen had already claimed its first victim. "Time is running out," he reminded them. 300 lives are at stake, and if this pathogen escapes, he let the thought hang in the air. They all knew what an uncontrolled outbreak could mean for the galaxy. Finally, the Council's chief administrator spoke. "Send the call to Earth, but make it clear, this is an emergency authorization only. And find someone with actual medical credentials. If we must have a Deathworlder, let's at least get one with a proper education." Reed nodded, already pulling up the database of Earth's medical professionals. They needed help, even if it came from the last place in the galaxy they wanted to ask for it. Dr. James Miller was eating lunch in his hospital's break room when the call came. At first, he thought the strange blue light filling the room was a malfunction in the hospital's new LED system. Then a hologram appeared above his half-eaten sandwich. "Dr. James Miller of Earth," a gentle voice announced. "The Galactic Council requires your immediate assistance." James nearly choked on his coffee. In 15 years of medical practice, this was the last thing he expected to hear. Everyone knew the Council avoided contact with Earth whenever possible. "This is Dr. Miller," he answered, setting down his cup carefully. "How can I help?" The hologram shifted, showing a delicate alien with 4 eyes and blue-tinted skin. "I am head researcher Reed. We have a critical emergency at our main medical research station. You are being offered temporary emergency clearance to assist." As Reed explained the situation, James listened carefully, his mind already working through the problems. A deadly pathogen, 300 lives at risk, and a space station full of researchers who couldn't physically handle their own containment gear. "Why me specifically?" James asked, though he was already guessing the answer. "Your published work on infectious diseases is impressive," Reed admitted reluctantly, "and you have experience working in high-gravity environments with heavy protective equipment. Most importantly, you're available immediately." James nodded. His time working in outbreak zones on Earth had taught him how to handle protective gear for long periods. What these aliens considered unbearably heavy would feel normal to him. "When do we leave?" "Now," Reed replied. "A transport is already waiting on your hospital's roof." James grabbed his emergency kit. He'd learned long ago to keep one ready. As he rushed to the roof, his mind raced through what he knew about alien biology. Most species in the Council evolved on low-gravity worlds, with lighter bones and weaker muscles than humans. No wonder they were struggling. The transport ship was unlike anything he'd seen before. It was sleek, pristine, and clearly built for beings much smaller than himself. The pilot, a thin creature with silvery skin, flinched when James ducked through the door. "Please secure yourself, Doctor," the pilot said nervously. "We'll be traveling at high speed." The seat creaked under James's weight, but held. As they shot into space, he reviewed the medical data Reed had sent. The pathogen was like nothing he'd seen before. It adapted incredibly fast and seemed to target the respiratory system. "Amazing," he muttered, studying the mutation rates. "What's amazing about a deadly outbreak?" the pilot asked, keeping his eyes firmly ahead. "Every problem is an opportunity to learn," James replied, "and to help." They reached the station in record time. Through the viewport, James could see it was massive, a gleaming white structure that would have covered several city blocks back on Earth. As they docked, a new message from Reed appeared. "Dr. Miller, we've lost 27 people already. The containment suits are in Storage Bay 4. Please hurry." The station's gravity hit him as soon as he stepped off the ship. It felt like a light day on Earth, maybe 0.8 G. Around him, alien medical staff moved carefully, clearly struggling with the weight. They pressed themselves against the walls as he walked past, some trembling slightly. James found the storage bay easily enough. The containment suits looked advanced but sturdy, similar to what he'd used during the last major outbreak on Earth. He suited up quickly, checking the seals with practiced ease. "Impossible," he heard someone whisper as he lifted the helmet. "He's moving like it weighs nothing." "Dr. Miller," Reed's voice came through his suit's comm system. "Can you hear me?" "Loud and clear," James replied, running a final check on his equipment. "What's my first priority?" "We need you to help set up an emergency response team." But Reed hesitated. "Many of our staff are concerned about working directly with the Deathworlder." James smiled inside his helmet. He'd expected this. "Don't worry about that now. Just point me toward the sick. Actions speak louder than words." As he stepped toward the quarantine zone, James could feel the eyes of every alien on the station following him. He had a lot to prove, and not much time to do it. But first, he had lives to save. "Take me to your worst cases," he said, "and send me everything you know about the pathogen's mutation patterns. We've got work to do." The quarantine zone looked like a scene from a nightmare. Dr. Miller stepped through the airlock to find dozens of aliens lying on medical beds, their breathing labored. The medical staff moved slowly under the strain of their protective gear, taking far too long to reach patients in crisis. "Status update," James called out, his voice steady despite the grim scene before him. A thin alien doctor nearly dropped her medical scanner when she heard his voice. 43 critical cases now," she reported, her forearms trembling as she tried to hold up her protective suit. We can't move fast enough to treat them all." James immediately understood the problem. The protective suits, necessary to prevent infection, were so heavy that the alien medical staff could barely walk. They were exhausting themselves just trying to move between patients. "Everyone without a suit, evacuate now," he ordered. "I'll handle the critical cases until we can train a proper response team." The alien doctor stared at him. "But that's impossible. There are too many." James was already moving. He reached the first patient, checked vital signs, and administered treatment in less than a minute. Then he moved to the next, and the next, his movements swift and sure despite the bulky containment suit. Through his helmet camera, the station staff watched in amazement as he worked. In their eyes, he was lifting impossible weights and moving at incredible speeds. To James, it was just another day in emergency medicine. "Head researcher Reed," he called over the comm. "I need 5 volunteers for the emergency response team. The strongest you've got." "Dr. Miller," Reed's voice came back, hesitant. "Our people can barely move in those suits." "Trust me," James interrupted, even as he inserted an IV line into another patient. "I have an idea." Within minutes, 5 nervous aliens arrived at the quarantine zone's prep area. They were bigger than the others, but still looked fragile to James's eyes. "Watch carefully," he said, demonstrating how to move efficiently in the suit. "You're fighting the weight. Don't let your body adapt to it. Start with small movements." He showed them how to distribute the suit's weight, how to conserve energy with each step. It was knowledge every human learned naturally growing up on Earth, but for these aliens, it was revolutionary. "The suit isn't your enemy," he explained, helping one of them stand. "It's your shield. Work with it, not against it." Hour after hour, James moved between training his team and treating the most critical patients. His stamina seemed endless to the watching aliens. Even the council members observing through the security feeds couldn't hide their astonishment. "The human has been working for 6 hours straight," one council member noted. "In conditions our people can barely tolerate for minutes." "Perhaps," another responded quietly, "we have been too quick to judge their strength as mere brutality." Inside the quarantine zone, James had no time for politics. The pathogen was mutating faster than expected, and more patients were showing severe symptoms. He needed his team ready now. "Good," he encouraged as one of his trainees successfully moved between 2 patients without stopping to rest. "You're getting it. Remember, smooth movements save energy." Suddenly, alarms blared through the station. The AI's calm voice brought chilling news. "Warning. Pathogen mutation rate increasing. Estimated time to containment failure, 12 hours. James looked at his partially trained team, at the rooms full of sick researchers, at the complex equipment they needed to move. 12 hours wasn't much time, but he'd worked with worse. "Right," he said, his voice carrying across the comm system. "Listen carefully. We're going to save everyone in this station, but I need you all to trust me, even if what I ask seems impossible." The aliens looked at each other, then back at him. They had seen him do the impossible for 6 hours straight. One by one, they nodded. James smiled inside his helmet. "Then let's get to work. And someone find me some coffee. We're going to need it." The alien medical staff didn't know what coffee was, but they understood the look in his eyes. It was the look of someone who wouldn't stop until the job was done, no matter what it took. Dr. Miller stared at the holographic display of the pathogen structure, his tired eyes catching something unusual. He'd been working for 10 straight hours, but this was too important to miss. Around him, his newly trained team moved with growing confidence in their suits, though still far slower than him. "Look at this," he called to Reed, who was monitoring from the safe zone. "The pathogen behaves differently under varying gravity levels. Have you noticed this pattern?" Reed's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of surprise. "Impossible." We checked. "Wait." He leaned closer to his screen. "You're right. How did we miss this?" "Because you're used to thinking in low-gravity terms," James explained, moving to check on a critical patient while talking. "On Earth, we see this kind of adaptation in deep-sea bacteria. They change their structure based on pressure." A loud crash interrupted their discussion. One of the alien doctors had collapsed, the weight of her suit finally overwhelming her. James reached her in 3 quick steps, lifting her easily. "I'm fine," she wheezed. "Just tired." "Take a break, Doc," James said kindly, helping her to a chair. "I need your brain working, not your muscles." Turning back to the hologram, James pointed to several areas with his free hand while adjusting a patient's medication with the other. "The pathogen is using the gravity difference to enhance its reproduction rate. That's why it's spreading faster in higher gravity areas of the station." Reed's antenna twitched nervously. "Can we use this information?" "Maybe." James paused, an idea forming. What if we fight fire with fire?" "Explain," Reed demanded, while other alien scientists gathered around their screens. "On Earth, we have bacteria that thrive in extreme conditions, high pressure, high gravity." James started pulling up Earth medical databases on his suit's computer. "If we can modify some of these organisms to—" "Absolutely not," one of the council members interrupted through the comm. "Using Deathworld organisms, the risk is too high." James continued working as he argued. "With respect, we're running out of options. The current treatments aren't working fast enough. The pathogen is adapting to everything we throw at it." As if to emphasize his point, monitors started beeping urgently around the room. 3 more patients had just entered critical condition. "Listen," James said, his voice firm but calm as he rushed to stabilize the new critical cases. "I understand your concerns. Earth organisms can be aggressive. But right now, that's exactly what we need." He moved between patients as he explained, his movements efficient despite hours of continuous work. The aliens watched as he lifted equipment that would take 3 of them to move, all while maintaining his train of thought. "Earth's bacteria have evolved to fight in high-gravity conditions. They might be our best chance to create an effective treatment." He paused, checking another patient's vitals. "But I need your permission to access my stored samples. And I need it now." The council chamber erupted in argument. On the main screen, James could see various members gesturing frantically. Meanwhile, more warning lights began flashing. 2 more critical cases, the station's AI announced calmly. "Pathogen mutation rate increasing by 15%. James looked directly into the camera. "Every minute we wait, we lose ground. I know using Earth organisms seems dangerous, but right now, the real danger is doing nothing." Reed, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Council members, I support Dr. Miller's proposal. We've seen his capabilities. His unusual strength has already saved dozens. Perhaps his world's organisms are exactly what we need." The council chamber fell silent. The head counselor leaned forward. "Dr. Miller, if we approve this, can you guarantee containment of these Earth organisms?" "Yes," James replied without hesitation. "I stake my life on it. Literally, I'll be working with them directly." More alarms blared. Another patient crashed. James moved to help while waiting for their answer, his movements still steady despite exhaustion. Finally, the council head spoke. "Permission granted. But Dr. Miller, if anything goes wrong—" "It won't," James said, already sending the access codes for his samples. Because failure isn't an option, not when lives are at stake. As the authorization came through, James allowed himself a small smile. Now the real work would begin. And they had less than 8 hours left. The isolation lab hummed with energy as Dr. Miller worked. His Earth-based samples had arrived through the station's secure transport system, and he wasted no time. His fingers moved quickly over the complex equipment, mixing cultures with a speed that made the watching aliens dizzy. Are all humans this tireless? Reed asked through the comm, watching James work well into his 14th straight hour. Not tireless, James replied, carefully measuring a bacterial culture. Just stubborn. On Earth, we call it running on adrenaline. A crash from the main ward interrupted them. James rushed out to find 2 of his trained team members struggling with a fallen oxygen unit. Without hesitation, he lifted the heavy equipment one-handed, freeing the trapped aliens. "Thank you," one wheezed. "The suits, they're getting heavier." "No," James corrected, setting the equipment in place. "You're getting tired. Rotate out. I need you fresh for what's coming." Back in the lab, James returned to his work. The Earth bacteria were responding exactly as he'd hoped, thriving in the station's artificial gravity. But making them fight the alien pathogen without harming the patients, that was the real challenge. "Dr. Miller," the station's AI announced, 5 more patients have entered critical condition. Time to containment failure, 6 hours. James nodded, his face set with determination. "Show me their vital signs." Holographic displays filled the air around him. The patterns confirmed his theory. The pathogen was using gravity to strengthen itself. But now he had a counterweapon. "Reed," he called out, "I need authorization for emergency treatment. The modified Earth bacteria are ready." There was a tense pause. Using untested Earth organisms on alien patients was incredibly risky. But the death toll was rising. "How certain are you about this?" Reed asked. James looked at his cultures, then at the patient readings. "Certain enough to test it on myself first." The aliens watching gasped as James inserted a sample of the pathogen into his suit, followed immediately by his modified treatment. Everyone held their breath, waiting. "Remarkable," Reed whispered, watching the readings. "Your immune system, it's actually fighting both organisms, keeping them in check." "Human bodies are good at that," James explained, already preparing doses for the critical patients. "We evolved fighting thousands of pathogens. Now let me treat the critical cases before." Warning lights flashed red. A voice echoed through the station. "Warning. Containment breach in Section 4. Emergency protocols engage." James grabbed the treatment doses and ran. Section 4 housed 10 of their most critical patients. As he reached the sealed doors, he saw the problem. The section's air filtration had failed. The patients inside were running out of oxygen. "The rescue teams can't get through," Reed reported frantically. "The gravity controls are malfunctioning. It's at full Earth gravity in there." James checked his suit's oxygen levels. "Then I'll go alone." "That's suicide," someone shouted. Even in a suit, the pathogen concentration. But James was already overriding the door controls. He burst into the ward, finding patients gasping for air. Moving with practiced efficiency, he began administering his treatment while simultaneously setting up emergency oxygen supplies. The aliens watched in awe through the security feeds as James worked. In the high gravity, wearing a heavy containment suit, surrounded by a lethal concentration of pathogens, he moved like it was just another day at work. "Patients stabilizing," the AI reported after 20 intense minutes. "Treatment appears effective. Pathogen levels decreasing." James allowed himself a small smile as he helped the last patient. His modified Earth bacteria were working, fighting the alien pathogen while leaving the patients unharmed. His gamble had paid off. "Dr. Miller," Reed's voice was full of disbelief. "Your suit's sensors. You've been exposed to the pathogen, but your vital signs are stable." Like I said, James replied, already heading back to prepare more doses. Earth creatures are stubborn. Now let's cure everyone else before this containment breach gets worse. The station's staff watched in amazement as their dangerous Deathworlder turned out to be their salvation. But James had no time for their changed perceptions. He had more lives to save, and time was still running out. Full containment failure in 15 minutes, the station's AI announced. The words echoed through corridors now filled with flashing red emergency lights. Dr. Miller looked up from his latest patient, his mind racing through options. The treatment was working. Patients were recovering, but not fast enough. The station's main containment field was failing sector by sector. Soon, the pathogen would spread throughout the entire facility. How many patients still need evacuation? James asked, his voice rough from hours of non-stop work. Reed's response was grim. 32 in the high-risk sectors. But doctor, the gravity systems are completely malfunctioning. Those sectors are at 1.2 Earth gravity now. Even our emergency teams can't. A thunderous crash cut him off. One of the main support beams had buckled under the shifting gravity fields, blocking the primary evacuation route. We need a new plan, James stated, already moving. Send me the patient locations. All of them. You can't possibly. Reed started. Watch me. James sprinted to the first high-risk ward. Inside, he found 3 patients still connected to life support equipment. The machines, designed for the station's normal low gravity, were threatening to collapse under their own weight. Without hesitation, James began disconnecting patients from the failing machines and connecting them to the portable units on his suit. Years of emergency medicine on Earth had taught him how to improvise. This is impossible, one council member commented, watching through the security feeds. He's carrying 3 patients and medical equipment in high gravity, in a containment suit, after working for almost 20 hours straight. But James wasn't done. He carefully secured the patients and equipment, then lifted all of them at once. His muscles strained, but held. The human body, evolved under Earth's punishing gravity, was proving its worth. Next location, he demanded, already moving. Behind him, his trained team worked to stabilize the evacuated patients in the safe zone. Ward after ward, James repeated the process. 2 patients under each arm, sometimes one over his shoulder, always careful despite his speed. The aliens watched in stunned silence as their primitive human guest performed what they considered physically impossible. Warning, the AI announced. Structural integrity failing in Section 7. Complete collapse imminent. James checked his display. There were still 8 patients in Section 7. Time to collapse, he asked, running. 4 minutes, the AI responded. That's plenty of time, James muttered, overriding the security doors. He found the patients trapped behind fallen equipment. The room's gravity was now at 1.3 Earth normal, enough to make even him feel the strain. But there was no time for caution. Hold on, he told the conscious patients. This won't be comfortable. Using strength born from desperate need, James began clearing a path. Equipment that would normally require mechanical lifts, he moved by hand. His suit's servos whined in protest, but he didn't slow down. 2 minutes to structural collapse, the AI warned. James had 4 patients out. 4 to go. His muscles burned, his breath came in harsh gasps, but he kept moving. 1 minute. The last group of patients was the hardest. 3 were still on life support. James quickly transferred them to his suit's systems, mentally thanking his emergency field training. 30 seconds. Almost there, he grunted, lifting the final group. His legs shook with fatigue as he carried them toward safety. 10 seconds. James burst through the airlock just as Section 7 collapsed behind him. The crash was deafening, but he didn't stop until every patient was safely in the medical bay. Finally, he allowed himself to lean against a wall. His suit was damaged, his muscles trembling from exhaustion, but his mind remained sharp. Status report, he demanded. Reed's voice was filled with disbelief. All patients evacuated from high-risk sectors. The treatment is showing 89% effectiveness. And you just evacuated 32 people in less than 15 minutes. James straightened up, checking his suit's readings. Good. Now, about that main containment field. Dr. Miller, Reed interrupted, you need rest. You've been working for. The station is still in danger. James cut him off. And I'm still standing. That means I'm still working. Now show me the containment field controls. We're not done yet. The watching aliens began to understand. It wasn't just human strength that made them formidable. It was their sheer, unstoppable determination to finish what they started. 3 days after the crisis, Dr. James Miller stood before the Galactic Council, his massive frame making the elegant alien podium look like children's furniture. The emergency was over, but its impact was just beginning to ripple through galactic society. Let me summarize the events. The council head began, all 4 eyes fixed on James. You worked for 26 continuous hours in high-gravity conditions. You personally saved 98 lives through direct intervention. Your Earth-based treatment cured all infected patients. And you prevented a full station collapse by manually resetting the containment field generators. That's correct, James replied simply. He cleaned up since the crisis, but dark circles under his eyes showed he was still recovering. Impossible, one council member muttered, then lowered his voice. And yet we all watched you do it. The chamber's screens lit up, showing footage from the station. James carrying multiple patients through high-gravity zones. James lifting collapsed support beams. James working tirelessly while others had to rest. What we considered impossible, Reed spoke up from his seat, was simply Tuesday for Dr. Miller. A quiet laugh rippled through the chamber. James smiled slightly. During the crisis, he'd mentioned it was just another Tuesday when someone called him superhuman. The medical research station is requesting permanent human medical staff, another council member announced, as are 3 other major facilities. We cannot ignore what this incident has shown us. The council head continued. Human physical capabilities, when combined with their medical knowledge, offer unique advantages. Dr. Miller has proven that what we once feared as barbaric strength can be a tremendous asset. James shifted uncomfortably. If I may speak. The council nodded. Strength isn't what saved those people, James said firmly. Knowledge did. Experience did. The willingness to try new solutions did. Yes, I can lift heavy things. But that's just a tool, like any other. He gestured to Reed and the other station staff present. Your people adapted quickly. They learned to work in conditions they never thought possible. They trusted an untested treatment because they put saving lives above their fears. That's not about physical strength. That's about character. The chamber fell silent, considering his words. Nevertheless, the council head continued. We have a proposal. We are creating a new division, the Galactic Medical Emergency Response Team. And we want you to lead it. James blinked in surprise. Me? You will train others, both humans and non-humans. Help us prepare for future crises. Show us how to turn our different capabilities into strengths rather than divisions. Behind James, several of his emergency response team members from the station nodded encouragingly. They had already experienced firsthand how his teaching could help them overcome their perceived limitations. There's one condition, James said after a moment. The council tensed. Stop calling Earth a death world, he continued. Start calling it what it is, a challenging world that created a people capable of helping others. Because that's what humans do best. We adapt, we overcome, and we help others do the same. The council head's antenna twitched, the equivalent of a smile. Indeed, perhaps we have been too quick to judge based on gravity and strength alone. Your actions have shown us a better way. One by one, the council members voted. The decision was unanimous. As James accepted his new position, He could see the change in how they looked at him. No longer with fear of a Deathworlder's strength, but with respect for a healer's wisdom. "Dr. Miller," Reed called as the session ended. "The station's staff wanted you to have this." He handed James a small crystal. When activated, it showed a hologram of the medical bay, now fully restored. On the wall was a new plaque. "When the impossible is needed, call a friend from Earth." James smiled. "You know this means you'll be seeing a lot more humans around the station." "Good," Reed replied. "We could use some impossible things now and then. Just, maybe not every Tuesday." As laughter filled the chamber, James looked at the crystal in his hand. The galaxy had called a Deathworlder in their hour of need, and found not a monster, but a healer. It wasn't the strength of his world that mattered most. It was the strength of his determination to help others. Sometimes, the most powerful force in the universe wasn't gravity or strength, but the simple willingness to reach out and help, no matter the obstacles. And that, James knew, was something every world could learn.